Hi, and welcome to Behind the Beacon, where we do a deep dive and an exploration into the news behind the news at the Bucks County Beacon. I'm Daralyse Lyons. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer, joined by Emily Smith, owner and publisher at the Beacon. And we're so glad to be back for another conversation.
We are.
Yeah.
Here we are again.
I know, right? It feels like it was just last week, even though these come out every other week. But I think, in our last episode, episode 5, we were talking about our upcoming panel event or discussion moderated by Connor O'Hanlon. We were joined by 4 amazing panelists. For those who were there, it was a wonderful time. For those who weren't, we are releasing the audio content on the Signal podcast, so the Beacon's other podcast. So if you're not subscribed to that, go over and subscribe, or go check out the, all of that podcast content, including this upcoming event panel discussion, which will be released there. But we talked about the fact that people were going to be asking questions at that conversation, and we wanted to bring some of those questions to you here on Behind the Beacon because we thought they might have some relevance. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be talking about some of the themes that emerge. We're not going to repeat that content, but we're just going to talk a little bit about some of the themes that came up and our thoughts from the perspective of behind the beacon and the news behind the news, and kind of how we can address some of the thoughts and the concepts that came out of that conversation that we had on June 2nd. I can't believe it's June already.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Emily, one of the consistent questions that people were asking at this event called The Power of Participation was like, how did they get involved? Like, how do people get involved? And one of the themes that came up was barriers to involvement. And we talked about lack of representation or race or, economic factors or mental health concerns and, a lot of the things that can be barriers to getting involved in civic participation in people's communities. But I think what I want to talk about are some of the barriers that people face in understanding and accessing news. So can you maybe talk a little bit about some of the ways in which it's challenging for people to get the information that they need and how we're trying to address that at the Beacon?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when we first started the Beacon, you have to look at the total addressable market,
Yeah.
and you have to look at things like their technology, right? That is actually part of the equation of how do you get news to people?
Yeah.
Is do they have the technology available to them in order to access the news? So, with a print product that's free in, the local coffee shop,
Yeah.
obviously there's a lower barrier to entry there. With an online product, it's free, but you have to be able to get online. What I found out when I did that research was that this was 2020, 2021. 89, 90% of Bucks County residents have access to internet.
Yep.
So that is really good compared to some places.
Yep.
But the question is, is it shared access? Is it, on their phone only?
Right.
Is it, access in a public place? There's various things like that.
Right.
But then the next barriers are there's lots of news organizations that have paywalls, obviously. And that creates a barrier to get the news, which is why we don't have one.
Yeah.
And then another barrier is the language in which the news is delivered and the cultural viewpoint. Because, what I learned from talking to some of my Spanish speaking colleagues in other localities is that even if we put out the news in Spanish, it wouldn't necessarily resonate because there's different types of Spanish speakers and some of them, don't necessarily read,
Yeah.
and like reading itself is a barrier, right? If you have to read it versus listening to it. And then you get into all of the accessibility issues related to handicap accessibility, which is something that has been in the technology of the internet has been being implemented over the last, 10 years. But in the last year, it's actually there's had to be upgrades to government websites for
Yes.
accessibility so that if you're hearing or vision impaired, there is another option for you.
Yeah.
So does that answer your question? There's like a
Yeah, it
million.
absolutely does. And it's really interesting because when I think about the Beacon, I think about the fact that we have intentionally kept our content free to make
Yeah.
it more accessible for people. And that's huge. And also that 10% of people who maybe don't have access to the internet, or, people who for whom English is a second language, or maybe, there's not even fluency or full comprehension. It's like, I think one of the pieces of awareness is that, like, we cannot possibly reach every single person in Bucks
Yeah.
County. That would be impossible. And I don't think we are even aspiring to do that, because that'd be like
Well, it'd be amazing,
yeah,
but
it'd be
yeah.
amazing. Yeah. If it happens, great.
Everyone would
And
like every voter to vote too. Every registered voter to vote, everyone who's able to be registered to be
yes,
registered and
yes.
then vote. I mean, it's the same thing. Like you're never going to get 100%,
Right.
but the closer you can get to it, it's aspirational,
Well, and I
obviously.
think voting is a really good example because, people turn out to vote more when it is more convenient for them, right? So when they've got a
Yeah.
polling place within a block or two of their house, it's going to be a lot easier than if they have to drive 3 miles to get there.
Right.
When they don't have to present an ID, it's going to be easier when they can mail in their ballot. Like, I mean, there's all
Yeah.
these things that kind of make voting more accessible. And we did a recent series with Technically where we talked about some of the digital aspects of voting and voting accessibility and things. So if you haven't heard that or read that, check that out, and I'll try to remember to put a link to that in the show notes for people. But yeah, I mean, I think that when we think about anything, whether it be voting or healthy food or, healthcare or any of those things, the more available, accessible, and affordable it is for people, the more likely they're going to be to avail themselves of those resources.
Right.
Yeah.
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 I completely agree. And I would actually say that Bucks County, when it comes to voting, is actually better than a lot. They've got early voting, you know, mailing drop boxes. Like that's something in many counties in Pennsylvania that doesn't exist.
Well, and it exists because there's a lot of advocacy and civic engagement in
Yeah.
Bucks County. I mean, people are on, any side of the political aisle are coming out and they're speaking out for causes, and there's rallies and there's marches and there's signs on lawns, and I mean, people are active, and so they're activated through that advocacy.
And yet,
Yes.
and yet, the percentage of people that are voting versus the percentage of registered voters
Yeah. Yeah.
is, Bucks County has pretty good numbers. Depending on the election cycle, I think they're between 40% and 70% of
Right.
registered voters.
Yeah. Right.
And those are pretty good numbers,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
but it's far from 100.
I know. Well, it's interesting, right? Like, because I think both things are true, right? Like, we can acknowledge that, oh, yeah, like this is pretty good. And also it's far from perfect. And, and there's pluses and minuses to everything. I mean, when we talk about our accessibility, yes, we remain paywall free, et
Yeah,
cetera, but free to read is not free to produce, as we've talked about on this podcast before. And I think only like 1% of our readers donate to the
yeah,
Beacon. And so at a certain point, if reader revenue is what keeps us going, if only 1% of readers give, then the Beacon will cease to exist. And then
yeah,
it will not be accessible to people because so it's like, how do we navigate this? And we've made the choice to remain without a paywall, but then that means that I have to find creative ways to bring in money, and
yeah,
engage people so that those who are able to access us, who don't have any barriers, can sort of create the space for those who might have economic barriers or whatever to supporting
right.
their local news organization.
Right. And I would say all of those other accessibility things that I talked about when it comes to handicap accessibility, language and culture
Yeah.
accessibility, all of those things, those are all driven by time and money constraints as well.
Yes.
Like I have vendors that are ready to make audio versions of every article of ours.
Wow. So
we
if
can't afford.
someone was listening to this and they're like, that seems like an amazing thing, and I would love to support that, like, I-
I don't know how much it is yet.
yeah, yeah. Well,
I haven't even made the call because I know it's more than we can afford.
yeah, right,
Yes.
right. And so if like I think that's so important, right? Like that you can be aware of barriers, you can know what it takes to make things more accessible and sort of have these aspirations of, well, once we get this amount of money, we can make this happen. But I think like the call for accessibility in my work before this, I was in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work. And sometimes people would ask for things and I would want to do those things. And those things would make total sense and be mission and vision aligned. But then there's our accessibility issues where like maybe we can't access that because of our own financial constraints. So it's,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Totally true.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then another accessibility piece I see though is just lack of awareness. Like I know we've been talking about hidden news deserts and how like I mean prior to the Bucks County Beacon, people were getting some of their Bucks County news from the Philadelphia Inquirer,
Yeah.
WHYY, which is like great, wonderful, but they're helicoptering in. They're not really embedded in the community in the same way. And so I think, sometimes lack of availability is also an issue and lack of awareness of the existence of a news outlet, et cetera.
Yeah, for sure. And that goes to this whole like, how do you find the
Yeah.
news? And a question that we got asked at a cultivation event we had was, how do you reach the people who are in a social media news bubble,
Yeah.
right? They're an echo chamber.
Yeah.
And that's actually a problem that I am constantly trying to figure out how to fix. I think that is a very interesting problem that is more technology driven than people give it credit for.
Yeah.
And so that accessibility to the news where people don't know we exist
Yeah.
because they're in this other echo chamber of social media.
Yeah.
And we found out from one survey we did in another county that lots and lots of people get their news from social media. That's how they get their news
Yes. Yes.
because
Well,
they follow a couple news organizations and that's it.
well, a lot of people don't follow news organizations. They're following influencers. And so they're getting
That's
their
also
news. I'm making quotations for anyone who's listening, but like,
right.
and influencers, there's some influencers who have partnerships with news organizations, and there's some influencers who do a lot of research and vetting, and like they put out really stellar content. And then there's some influencers that just share their opinions as
Make
though
it
they're
up.
news. Right. And that there's a spectrum. And so I also think about how do you solve a problem that people don't think of as a problem. So, like, we might say, or the person who was at this cultivation event might say, oh, how do we reach these people who are in their echo chambers of news who aren't getting access to accurate information? But
Yeah.
there's many, many people who are out there who are getting their news on social media or from whatever a news outlet that might not have the same rigorous reporting standards, and they're fine with that. Like they're not
They don't know.
aware that there's an alternative, or that and even if that an alternative I think presented itself, they wouldn't necessarily want to avail themselves of that. But I think it's our job to get that alternative to as many people as possible. So I don't know. It's an interesting problem.
There's it's it's even deeper than that because even people who are like, I want to avail myself of real rigorous reporting. There are websites that you can go to check bias,
Yeah.
to check, all sorts of things about news organizations. But some of those are owned by right wing think tanks.
Yeah, right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So there's so much hidden bias in the
Yeah.
internet, like where they're trying to legitimize sources of information.
Right.
There is no one source of truth.
Right. Well, and speaking of bias, and like, I mean, this whole thing behind the beacon, we're sort of reporting on ourselves. And I think maybe we should talk about this, be a great opportunity to talk a little bit about how when the beacon originated, we were originally like self-defined as a progressive news outlet. We are no longer see ourselves that way or define ourselves that way. And we've worked really hard to
Yeah.
to embody sort of like true journalistic values, but like we've bumped up against some bias around like, oh, well, you guys are just a bunch of liberals or
Yeah.
whatever. So like,
Yeah. Bunch of commie liberals. Yeah.
yeah. So talk about that, Emily, as the person who's
Yeah.
been here from the beginning.
Yeah. I would say I still continue to find places where it says progressive in our about things on
Yeah.
different places because we have our information all over the internet. So for everyone that sees it, send me a note. I'm trying to remove it. I just keep seeing them and I'm like, shoot. Yeah. But I think it's important to say that when we started out in this idea of being a progressive news organization, a progressive voice, it wasn't about not reporting the news. It was about the fact that those voices were being silenced
Mm,
and hidden because the news organizations that were around were run by at least center right
yes.
people, and they just weren't covering the stories and the people of the liberal and progressive community.
Right.
So I think it's fair to say, like, I talked to other news publishers about this because, like, I have a friend, Jake, who owns a news publication in Arizona, and his is an LGBTQ plus
Yeah.
news organization. And it is very clearly defined as that, but it's
Yeah.
not about LGBTQ plus issues.
Right.
It's about regular reporting. It's about investigative reporting, culture, all sorts
Yeah.
of things, but through their lens.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that that is a valuable thing to understand is that if there are underreported parts of culture and society,
Yeah.
it's worth reporting. So that's not something that we're trying to pull back from.
Right. 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 Yes.
It's just that we have faced a fair amount of bias from other people saying, "Oh, you're just lefties that are, just trying to get people elected and whatever." No, I mean, God forbid you give them somewhere to talk, you
Right,
know?
right. Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
and it's interesting because, like, even if we're talking about accessibility, like, just that explanation, like, people don't always get access to, they don't always understand kind of words behind the words, or there's a certain amount of stigma. Like, I know even nowadays there was a study that came out that, like, the word journalism and the word democracy, like, you're not even really supposed to say that these days. So sorry that I said it.
democracy
Yeah.
democracy's lefty. That's
Right,
progressive.
right. Yeah, right. And so, like, so it's really interesting because it's how do we package the truth in a way that is honest and has integrity, but it also doesn't alienate people on the basis of certain, I don't know, out of date catchphrases or, ways of thought that are seemingly aligned with something else. Like, so it's, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just interesting.
I have an uncle who is a very smart attorney in New York City. He runs an international law firm. He is a Republican. My aunt, his wife, is a Democrat,
Yeah.
and he is legit one of the smartest people I know. He started reading The Beacon a year or two ago,
Yeah.
and he complained to me every time I saw him at the holidays that it was too lefty.
Yes.
And I was like, "I know, I'm working on it. Let me whatever." And he's like, "Well, I just think that there's more things that you could cover, and even without it being, from right-wing perspectives, because he's not that guy.
Yes.
He's fiscal responsible, you
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
person." He's like, "I think you could do a better job." And I was like, "I agree. We're a work in progress." And I said, "Uncle Jim, send me an article.
Yeah.
You know, I'd love to publish it in the Beacon. Give me your perspective."
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, I think it's really difficult, but that is where I want to live is the bridging the gap and giving actual people a place to speak from their perspective,
Yeah,
you
and
know?
I love that, and me too, like, and that's one of the things, like, our opinion pages may come across as being very sort of leftist or whatever, like, but that's because those are the people that are reading us and that are sending us opinion essays. So, like, if
Yeah.
you are someone who maybe has a fiscally conservative background, or I mean, I recently was listening to someone speak about reporting on abortion issues, and the journalist that they assigned to do that was someone who was anti-abortion, right? Like, to write those pieces, because they felt like, what, this person is going to bring a perspective that is not often thought about, whatever, like, when news organizations are reporting on these issues. And I think the reporting was made more rich by that person having their own lived experience that went against the grain of what most reporters would sort of report on. And so I think, we're not going to publish anything that's hateful or propaganda or,
Right.
bigoted or racist or anything like that. But certainly, if people have perspectives that go beyond the perspectives that are typically reflected in the Beacon, we want to hear from those people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the biggest thing that I want for the Beacon is for it to be a tool for civic engagement.
Right. Yeah.
We cover government and politics.
Yeah.
So let us be the tool for people to become more informed. And you can't be more informed if you don't have all the diversity of knowledge and opinions that are out there.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's, when you say that we cover government and politics and political issues, I mean, I think one of the things that is really helpful for me to understand when I'm thinking about civic engagement is that a political issue is like, oh, there's a pothole on my street that hasn't been
Yeah.
filled for several years.
Yeah.
It's how come the price of eggs is 3 times higher than it was before? I can't afford to fill my gas tank or whatever. I mean, a
Yeah.
political issue is, it's so hot in May or June. It used to not
Yeah.
be this hot until the middle of the summer. Like, so,
Right.
almost anything in life is political, like FDA approval,
Yeah.
the toothpaste that we use, the
Yeah.
things that we buy, whether or not we can get something from, the post office in a timely fashion or whatever. Like, all of
Yeah.
these things have political implications and ramifications. And so that, I think sometimes people hear civics and they're like, ugh, I did that in middle school and I wasn't interested, but that's
Right.
not what we're talking about.
No, that's not what we're talking about. And I do think that that is a barrier that we face is that people don't understand what civic life actually looks like
Yeah.
because they don't participate in the political process on the local level and they don't understand who to ask or why and what that has to do with government and who's responsible for it. I mean, like in my town for the last 2 months, we have had UGI, gas company, closing down streets willy nilly throughout
Yeah.
my borough every day. It's a different street. You never know which street is going to be the one that is closed,
Yes.
and it's driving people crazy. And then they're calling our borough and being like, what the hell?
Yeah. Yeah.
But there is like one town over, there was a sinkhole next to a high school 2 days ago,
Yeah.
and it was because a water main broke underground,
Right.
you know,
Right.
again, another civic issue.
Yes.
And there are like all of these layers to what is the local government actually doing and how are they involved in this and how can you be better informed so that you aren't surprised,
Yeah.
and unfortunately UGI is a utility and not a government group, so we can't stop them from this situation. All we did was try to, like, my borough tried to get them to do the work before we paved the streets
Yeah. Right. Right.
because
Yeah.
the a layering of all of the infrastructure that needs updated, you
Yeah.
know?
And one of the things I think about in terms of like getting engaged is like, how can people, because I believe that truth and information is key to any sort of civic engagement. So like
Yeah.
if people don't know what's happening, then they can't even take a step to do anything about it because they don't know what's happening. And so I there are ways that people can get civically involved and engaged, or just involved and engaged with the beacon as information engine that promotes civic engagement as a whole. And
Yeah.
so, like if businesses want to advertise in the beacon, right? That's both supporting the beacon and raising awareness within the local community about the existence
Right.
of your business. So that's a way that you can get involved, like on a very low level, right? Low lift.
Right.
Donating to the beacon, whether it's a small dollar donation, you can go to our website and make a monthly contribution, or you can, make a larger contribution earmarked for some purpose, environmental reporting, our voter guide, whatever else. There's coming out to our events. There's contacting us with news tips and stories. There's, if you're a writer or something in the community who has some sort of reporting background, you can contact us and pitch us freelance stories. You can, you know, write letters to the editor or opinion pieces. I mean, there's a lot of, I don't know if I'm missing anything, Emily, but there's a ton of ways that people can get involved. They can sponsor our events. Like there's,
Yeah.
partner with us if you are a member of a local community organization and you want to have us come out and talk to that community organization. We'll do that, right? Or you
Yeah.
teach at a school, you want us to come talk to your journalism class, like in the community. We will. There's a lot of ways that people can engage with us as an outlet.
Yeah. And spread the word that we exist.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's like share, like, share, and subscribe.
Yeah, right. Well, but like that to me, it's not just that we exist, it's like the information that people crave, right? So
Yeah.
we did an article about data centers. Like I would think if you read that article that you're a neighbor or a neighbor's neighbor or a coworker or something who also lives in Bucks County in the neighborhood that is going to be impacted by that might want to read about a data center
Yeah.
coming into their backyard. And so you can send them that article.
Yeah. We had someone email the other day saying she didn't even know about this data center and she
Yes.
just found out the other day,
Yes.
because of our reporting.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah. So it's like we want to bring people the information that they need, and we can't always find our way to them, and they can't find their way to us because of the echo chambers, et cetera, that we referenced
yeah.
earlier. So yeah, so sharing a pertinent article with a friend is a way to both support the beacon and support that friend in learning more about their community.
Right. I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what are some can we talk about some of the ways that we are working to create more opportunities for civic engagement by bringing people more information? Like, what are some of the things you're excited about doing, and how are we going to reach the community in more effective ways?
Well, there's always the voter guide. I think that is a huge thing that we have been working on for the last 2 years or something, and it continues to grow
Yeah.
and more traction. And we got the committee of 70 on board. We've got a widget so people can build their own ballot. I think that is all really awesome.
Yeah.
And then we also just recently put a button on the bottom of our articles to help shape our coverage,
Mm.
just to give us feedback on the articles, whether it's that specific article or something else that you think is missing, or anything like that. We now have a database that I've created in the background Dara doesn't even know about.
I don't even know. I mean, I've heard it
Maybe
mentioned, but I have yet to see the miracle behind the curtain or whatever. Because we need people to
Yeah,
fill out that survey so that there will be some results that Emily can
I
give
would love
back to the
to see
team.
something in the database.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yes, so that we can cross-reference it and whatever. Yeah, we are in this metrics for news cohort right now, which is another thing which takes our data that's coming in mixed with data, like, so it's our reporting, and then it's Google Analytics
Yeah.
and our writers, our topics, our everything. And then it kind of meshes it all together so that we can dig deep on who's reading what
Yeah.
and maybe why, so it should help us shape our coverage more by seeing what resonates
Yes.
and where, it because once we can geographically locate people with articles, then we can see if it's actually filtering through
Yeah.
to the correct community or if it has more, universal appeal further afield. You
Yes.
know what I mean? So I think that's going to be such a huge tool.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. And I'll say, I mean, I think you're always the data person and I'm always the
Yeah.
stories person. So, one of the things that was really meaningful for me at we had a cultivation event recently, and then we also had an in-person panel discussion where people came out. And what I really loved was talking to people one-on-one about, hey, how'd you find out about the beacon? And what do you know about us? And things what kind of coverage has made an impact in your life, and what do you want to see more of? And Emily and I have talked about this both on this podcast and behind the scenes. Like, those stories really help us. And so for me, like, while Emily's in the background doing her data wizardry, like, I would just love if people want to reach out to me or reach out to both of us. Our email addresses are on the website and stuff. People can reach out and just say, hey, I loved this coverage that you did, or I thought this was inadequate and I'd like to see, more reporting, or hey, there's a story that hasn't even been told yet, or whatever. Like, my granddaughter loves to read you, or my uncle, hates your whatever. Like, just any
Yeah.
feedback is helpful. And so for me, that's the way that people can get involved and engaged, in addition to making donations, in addition to signing up to be on our newsletter and all of those sorts of things that support the revenue engine. We also love that editorial feedback and love to
Yeah.
know what, like, the impact that we're making or not making, so that we can make informed decisions as we make choices moving forward.
Yeah, I would say, like, because I'm that data person, it's very interesting because sometimes we have these little tidbits of data and we don't understand what it is.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, some of our articles have become part of college courses, and we can tell because we can see it
Yeah.
in these university domains
Yeah.
where they have it and it's a referral and then people are reading it and it's clearly like it's like 20 people, so it's clearly like a class
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
college students that are reading this article. I would love for those professors to, like, let us know what they're teaching.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what
Totally.
I mean?
Yeah.
I that kind of stuff drives me crazy, is just not knowing. Like, I am so happy that they're sharing it and that we're part of a curriculum or a discussion about something,
Yeah.
but it would be awesome to know the background. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and like, I mean, I had the opportunity when I was working on the journalistic side of things to go and guest lecture at Annenberg College and Princeton and Temple University. And so, like, yeah, if someone is teaching a class or making their employees read our work or whatever, like, contact us, because who knows, we
Yeah,
might come out and talk to that class if you want to
right.
have us, and just begin a dialogue. I mean, I see the news, in particular local news, as a community conversation. Like, we work for the community, we bring the community information, they then tell us how that information landed, and we just kind of continue to be in ongoing conversation with each other in a way that hopefully is productive and empowering.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wish that we had, we get social media feedback that's not productive, but it would be amazing if we got feedback that was like, sometimes we do where it's like, oh, you missed this one part of the story,
Yeah, yeah.
you know? And then that adds more depth and breadth to our coverage.
Yes. Yeah.
But the problem is we don't know what we don't know. And we don't have access to the people that we don't have access to.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's all about building the base so that more people are looking, so that more people can contribute,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I just, as a side note, like, we don't have access to the people we don't have access to. I do want to say, because that is one of the themes that sometimes people will come to me and say, why don't you have more, Republican candidate coverage on your, on your site, et cetera. Like, we reach out to people,
We sure do.
and there's many people who won't get back to us, right? For whatever reason. And so I
Yeah.
think that is helpful too, like that just shaping an understanding in the community that will anyone who wants to talk to us about an important issue or topic or theme, like we want to have those conversations. We're open to those connections.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, especially like when we're talking about elections and stuff, like bread and butter stuff, like
Yeah.
we have a voter guide. We do put every Republican candidate on there,
Yeah.
but we have to go seek out the information, and that's not the easiest thing to do. And we're doing our best to sleuth through all of the stuff on the internet, and we call, we email. I know Cyril has, for years been trying to get certain people
Yes.
to respond to anything, and I think that it's important to know that, we are trying to give the whole story,
Yeah.
but we can't give what we're not getting from the actual people.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think that's really important. Is there anything else that you would want to add about sort of the topic of engagement and news accessibility?
Yeah. I don't think so. I think I've discussed enough of how many layers of inaccessibility and accessibility there are. I think that we endeavor to try really hard, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, we do. I feel almost like whatever Sisyphus rolling a rock up a hill or whatever. Like, I mean, there's certain things like there will never be 100% voter participation. There will never
Right.
be 100% news coverage or,
Right.
reader engagement or total accessible market participation. But we just try to get a little bit better each day and to serve the community a
Right.
little bit more. And the best way for us to do that is to be in conversation with the community. So for everyone who's watching this or listening to this, thank you. For everyone who reads the Beacon, thank you.
Yeah.
No feedback is off the table. We've talked about that before. So reach out to us. We want to hear from you. We don't want to be reporting news in a vacuum.
Right.
And yeah, and just I'm looking forward to the next conversation about this. And I really appreciate people who have listened to this so far. And if you have any questions about anything that we've talked about, or you want to, engage or discuss or argue or whatever, like, reach out. Go to Bucks County
We
Beach.
welcome it.
Wait, what'd you say?
We welcome it.
Yes, we
Yeah.
do. We are open books. So yeah, go to buckscountybeacon.com. You can hit the support button. You can, read our past coverage or check out issues of the podcast. And we'll see you next time. And thanks again for hanging in there with us for I thought an interesting conversation.
I thought so too.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.